The doctors saved my body. My wife moved on without it. I didn't wake up screaming or gasping like they show in movies. I woke up confused, heavy, slow, wrapped in a body that didn't quite belong to me yet. My eyes opened to a ceiling I didn't recognize, white and cracked in one corner, with a fluorescent light buzzing faintly like it was struggling to stay awake too. For a few seconds, I thought I was dreaming. Then I tried to move my hand and couldn't. That's when the panic should have hit. That's when pain should have announced itself, loud and unmistakable. But instead, what I felt was something colder, quieter, an absence so immediate and wrong that it made my chest tighten before I even understood why. There was a chair beside my bed, empty. I stared at it longer than made sense, my brain working overtime to justify what I was seeing. Maybe she'd gone to the bathroom. Maybe she was getting coffee. Maybe a nurse had asked her to step out. My wife should have been there. She was always there. Doctor appointments, boring meetings, the hard moments we never talked about later. She didn't leave those. That chair was supposed to hold her coat, her bag, her leg crossed over the other as she pretended not to be scared. I tried to speak. My throat burned, dry and useless. "Hey," someone said gently. A nurse leaned into view, her expression carefully neutral, the way professionals look when they don't want to tell you something yet. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're awake," she said. "That's a very good thing." "How long?" I croaked. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "Long enough." "We'll talk about that soon," she said. "Right now, just try to stay calm." I swallowed, every instinct screaming that calm was the wrong response. "My wife," I said. "Can you get my wife?" Her eyes flicked quickly to the empty chair. "I'll get the doctor," she replied, already stepping back. That was the moment the fear arrived for real. Not fear of injury, not fear of pain, fear of being alone when you shouldn't be. The doctor came with a chart and a seriousness that didn't belong to good news. He explained things slowly, like he was speaking to someone much older than me. Severe head trauma, complications, a prolonged period of unconsciousness. "How long?" I asked again. He took a breath. "Just under 8 months. 8 months." My mind refused the number outright. It tried to compress it, turn it into days, weeks, anything manageable. 8 months meant seasons, holidays, time that doesn't pause for anyone. "My wife," I said, more firmly now. "She should be here." The doctor didn't answer immediately. He sat down instead. "There have been changes," he said. That word again. Changes. The kind people use when they don't want to say loss. "What kind of changes?" I asked. He folded his hands. "Your emergency contact was updated 3 months ago." I felt my heartbeat spike, saw it jump on the monitor beside me. "Updated to who?" He didn't look away this time. "Not your wife." The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls had leaned in to listen. "She signed paperwork," he continued. "Medical decisions, financial authorizations. At the time, based on prognosis, the hospital accepted it." "Accepted what?" I snapped. I was unconscious. "Yes," he said gently. "But you were not expected to regain consciousness." The words landed wrong, like they were meant for someone else. "So where is she?" I asked. "Where's my wife now?" He paused, then said it. "She moved on." Moved on. As if this were a breakup conversation. As if I'd been part of a discussion. "No," I said. "That's not... What does that mean?" "It means," he replied carefully, that she asked not to be contacted if your condition changed. She is no longer listed as your spouse in our system. I stared at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence. The part where he told me this was a mistake. It didn't come. She thought I was dead, I said, searching for something that made this forgivable. He shook his head slowly. No. She was told you were alive, but unlikely to recover. There's a difference between being dead and being inconvenient. Dead people don't come back. They don't need care. They don't disrupt new plans. Over the next few days, I learned what moved on really meant. My phone was gone. My wallet never arrived with me. The nurse explained my personal belongings had been collected months earlier. By her. A social worker came with a folder thick enough to represent an entire life reduced to paper. Joint accounts closed, subscriptions canceled, lease terminated early. My name removed from utilities, from emergency lists, from places where it no longer fit. She was advised to prepare, the social worker said, like that explained everything. Prepare for what? A widowhood without the inconvenience of a funeral. When I asked if she'd visited at all, the answer was short. Not in the last 4 months. 4 months. I spent the rest of that day staring out the window, watching people walk past the hospital like the world hadn't shifted under my feet. Somewhere out there, my wife was alive, active, building something new. Somewhere out there, she had decided my story was finished before my body agreed. When I was discharged, no one came for me. The rideshare driver didn't know where to take me when I hesitated at the address. The building was familiar. The door wasn't. The locks were changed. My name wasn't on the mailbox. A stranger answered when I knocked, confused, irritated, protective of a life that now occupied the space where mine used to exist. "I think you've got the wrong place," he said. I walked away without correcting him. Friends didn't answer my calls. When they did, their voices were strained, careful, like they were talking to a ghost that had learned how to dial a phone. One of them finally said, "She told us you wouldn't want us to wait." Wait for what? Me to stop breathing? That night, alone in a temporary room arranged by the hospital, I lay awake and understood the truth fully for the first time. She didn't cheat on me. She didn't fight with me. She didn't even leave me. She erased me. And lying there, staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize for the second time in 1 week, I made a decision she would never see coming. I wasn't going to chase the life she replaced me with. I was going to disappear so completely that even the man I used to be couldn't find his way back. I didn't confront her. That surprised me most of all. Every instinct said I should call her, show up, demand answers, force the world to acknowledge that I was still here. But something inside me had gone quiet after the hospital, like a switch had flipped from react to observe. So instead of chasing her, I tried to understand the damage. Recovery was brutal in ways no one prepared me for. My body remembered how to exist before my mind did. Simple things, standing too fast, holding a pen, remembering what day it was, left me exhausted. Physical therapy filled my mornings. Paperwork filled my afternoons. At night, I lay awake replaying conversations I'd never get to finish. That's when I started piecing together how thoroughly I'd been removed. Emails bounced back. Accounts said my credentials no longer existed. Streaming profiles were gone. Cloud storage emptied. Even my contacts list was outdated. Numbers reassigned, names replaced. It was like my digital footprint had been scrubbed with intention, not grief. I found an old laptop at a resale shop and logged into social media for the first time since waking up. Her profile came up immediately. New city, new job, new last name added as a middle initial. Hers, reclaimed. Photos of apartments with exposed brick and sunlight. Group shots with people I didn't recognize. A smile that looked settled. The caption under one photo stopped me cold. Some chapters end quietly, and that's okay. Quietly. I scrolled further back, past the move, past the job announcement, past the careful rebranding of her life. There was no post about me, no hard season, no prayers appreciated, no we're hopeful, nothing that suggested I had ever been more than a problem she'd solved. I reached out to one friend I trusted, someone who'd been at our wedding, who knew the inside jokes, the hard years. He answered on the third ring, his voice tight. "Man, I didn't know if you'd ever—" "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, cutting him off. A long pause. "She told us you wouldn't want us to," he said. "She said you'd hate being remembered like that. Like, half alive. Half alive. That's how she framed it." I thanked him and hung up before he could apologize. That night, something solidified. She hadn't left because she was cruel. She hadn't stayed away because she didn't care. She left because moving on was easier than waiting. And she stayed away because my survival complicated the story she told herself. That realization hurt more than anger ever could. Over the next few weeks, I did something that looked like recovery from the outside, but wasn't. I stopped trying to reclaim anything. I didn't fight for the apartment. I didn't reopen accounts. I didn't correct people when they spoke about me in the past tense. Instead, I closed what little remained. I changed my number, forwarded no mail, let old email addresses expire. I took the money from a small disability settlement, packed what few possessions I'd managed to recover, and bought a one-way ticket to a city where no one knew my name. No dramatic goodbye, no announcement, just absence. In that city, I became intentional in a way I'd never been before. I chose a name that didn't echo my past, found work that didn't ask questions, rented a room that didn't carry memories. I kept my life small on purpose. Clean lines, no shared history, nothing that could be erased again. I told no one where I'd gone. Months turned into years. My body healed faster than my sense of identity, but eventually even that softened. I learned who I was without her, without the life I'd assumed was permanent. I learned that starting over isn't loud. It's repetitive. It's choosing to keep going when no one is watching. Then, one afternoon, years later, an email found me. It shouldn't have, but it did. The subject line was just my name, the one I no longer used. She'd found out I survived, and suddenly, the past was knocking, not because it missed me, but because it couldn't live with what it had done. I didn't answer right away. I let it sit, because for the first time since waking up, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. I didn't reply to her email, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much, all at once. Shock, a distant ache, and underneath it all, something steadier that surprised me. Control. She'd found out I survived. That meant someone talked. A doctor, a clerk. A loose thread she never thought to cut because she'd been so certain the story was finished. I reread the email slowly. No apology in the subject line. No explanation. Just my name, like she still had a right to use it. Inside, the message was longer. Careful, polished in that way people get when they've rehearsed something privately and convinced themselves it sounds reasonable. She said she'd heard I was alive, She said she'd been carrying this weight for years. She said she didn't know how to reach me and hoped this email still worked. She said she needed to talk. Not for answers, she claimed, but for closure. Closure. That word again. The same kind of language she used when she left. Soft words to wrap around hard decisions. I closed the laptop and went for a walk. I did that a lot when something threatened to pull me backward. I walked until my legs reminded me where I was now. New streets, new faces, a life that didn't require me to explain my absence to anyone. For days, I didn't answer. And then, against my better judgment, I dug. Not into her life, I'd learned that lesson, but into mine. The version she'd abandoned. I requested copies of my medical records, full timelines, notes I'd never been conscious enough to read, prognoses, decisions made on my behalf. That's where I found it. A form dated 3 months before I woke up, signed by her. Authorizing changes not just to my care, but to my legal representation, my emergency contact, my access to information. There was a handwritten note in the margin from a hospital administrator. Spouse requests reduced updates. States patient wouldn't want prolonged involvement. Wouldn't want. I sat with that for a long time. She hadn't just accepted the idea of losing me. She had actively minimized my presence while I was still here, quietly narrowing the space I occupied so her life could expand without friction. That wasn't grief. That was convenience. I finally replied to her email with one sentence. I'm alive. I'm safe. I won't be returning. She wrote back within minutes. She said she was relieved. She said she'd always hoped. She said she never stopped thinking about me. And then, inevitably, she asked where I was. That's when I understood something important. This wasn't about reconciliation, and it wasn't about love. It was about the unresolved guilt of having moved on too cleanly. She needed to see me, not to bring me back, but to prove to herself that what she did hadn't destroyed something real. I didn't give her my location. Instead, I proposed a neutral place. One meeting, public, brief. She agreed immediately. When the day came, I arrived early and chose a table with my back to the wall. Old habits die hard. I watched the door, not with fear, but with curiosity. Like I was about to meet a character from a story I'd finished reading years ago. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked worse. She didn't. She looked successful, put together, like someone whose life had continued uninterrupted. But there was something tight in her posture, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. She saw me and froze. For a moment, she just stared. I stayed seated. She approached slowly, like I might vanish if she moved too fast. "You're really here?" she said. "I said I was alive," I replied. She sat down, hands folded too neatly in front of her. Her eyes kept flicking over my face, my posture, my clothes, taking inventory, measuring damage. "I didn't know if you'd come," she said. "I didn't know if I should," I answered honestly. There was a pause. She swallowed. "I thought you were gone," she said. "They told me." "They told you I was inconvenient," I corrected. "There's a difference." Her face crumpled slightly at that. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "I did what I thought I had to," she said finally. "I couldn't stay suspended forever." "I wasn't asking you to," I said calmly. "I was asking you not to erase me." That landed. She looked down at the table. "I was scared," she whispered. "So was I replied. "The difference is I didn't wake up and find my entire life had decided I was already dead." She looked up then, eyes wet. "I tried to move on," she said. "I thought that's what people do." "Yes," I said, "after something ends." We sat in silence for a moment. The noise of the cafe filled the gap. Cups clinking, voices overlapping, a life continuing around us without any awareness of the moment it was witnessing. "I don't want anything from you," she said finally. "I just needed to know if you were okay." I considered that. "I am," I said, "because I didn't come back." She frowned. "I don't understand." "I know," I said gently. "That's the point." I stood up, placed a small amount of cash on the table, and picked up my jacket. "This is the only meeting we'll have," I said. "I'm not reopening anything. I'm not angry, and I don't need an apology." Her voice cracked. "Then why did you come?" I looked at her one last time. "Because you needed to see that I survived," I said. "And I needed you to know that surviving didn't mean returning." I walked out without waiting for her response. Behind me, I heard her call my name. I didn't turn around. I thought that meeting her would be the end of it, that once I walked away, the past would finally understand it had lost its claim on me. But I underestimated one thing. Guilt doesn't need permission to keep searching. She didn't stop trying to reach me. Not every day. Not desperately. That would have made it easier to ignore. Instead, it was spaced out. Emails every few months, each one different in tone but identical in purpose. She never asked me to come back. She never asked for forgiveness outright. She asked questions. How was I feeling now? Was I happy? Did I ever think about what might have been? Each message carried the same subtext. "Please let me know I didn't destroy you." I never replied. Because here's the truth I didn't tell her in that cafe. The hardest part of surviving wasn't waking up alone in a hospital room. It was realizing how easily I could have disappeared without disrupting anyone's momentum. Once you see that, you don't unsee it. Years passed. I built a life that didn't look impressive from the outside, but felt solid in ways my old one never had. I worked. I slept well. I made friends slowly, carefully, with people who met me as I was, not as who I used to be. I didn't talk about my past unless asked directly, and even then, I kept it factual. Clean. I learned that peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just stays. Then one afternoon, it almost shattered. I was leaving work when I saw her across the street, not approaching, not calling out, just standing there, frozen, like she'd stumbled onto a ghost she wasn't sure she was allowed to see. Time did something strange in that moment. It didn't slow down. It collapsed. She looked older, not dramatically, just realer. Like life had finally stopped cooperating with the story she told herself. Our eyes met. I felt nothing like panic, or anger, or longing. I felt recognition. She crossed the street before I could decide whether I wanted her to. "I didn't know you were here," she said, breathless. "I swear, I wasn't following you." "I know," I said, and I did. She didn't have the nerve for that kind of confrontation anymore. She stood there awkwardly, hands clenched around the strap of her bag. "I've been looking," she admitted. "Not like online searches, just listening, asking questions." I nodded once. "Why?" She hesitated, then said the quiet part out loud. "Because people talk about you like you vanished on purpose," she said. And I needed to know if that was true. I studied her face, the lines near her eyes, the tension she carried now that she hadn't before. Yes, I said. It's true. Her lips parted slightly. Why? This was the moment she thought she deserved. The explanation, the justification, the emotional reckoning. I gave her none of it. Because the last time I existed loudly, I said, I was erased anyway. She flinched. I didn't erase you, she said quickly. I did what I had to do. You did what was easiest, I replied. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. And you called it survival. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. That too was progress. I live with that, she said. Every day. I know, I said. That's why I never came back. She stared at me, confused. Because if I had, I continued, you would have turned my survival into your redemption. And I didn't survive so someone else could feel better about leaving me. That landed hard. People passing by glanced at us, sensing the gravity without understanding it. I took a step back. This is the last conversation we'll ever have, I said. Not because I hate you, but because I finally chose myself. She swallowed. Do you ever think about me? I paused, long enough to be honest. No, I said. I think about the man I became when I stopped waiting to be chosen. She nodded slowly, like she was memorizing the words for later, for the nights when the guilt got loud again. I turned to leave. Wait, she said. Just one thing. Are you okay? I looked at her then, really looked. I'm more than okay, I said. I'm unfindable. I walked away. This time she didn't call after me, because I think she finally understood what I'd taken from her. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The right to access my life. There's a strange peace that comes after you close the last door. Not slam it. Not lock it with shaking hands. Just close it gently, knowing you'll never need to open it again. After that final encounter, I expected something dramatic to follow. Regret, maybe, or a delayed wave of grief I hadn't processed yet. That's how stories usually work. There's always a cost that comes due later. But that didn't happen. What happened instead was quieter. Life kept going. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and stood by the window of my apartment watching the city wake up. Cars moved. People walked dogs. Someone laughed too loudly on the sidewalk below. None of them knew who I was. None of them knew what I'd survived. And for the first time, that anonymity felt like a gift instead of a loss. I went to work, answered emails, fixed a problem that had nothing to do with my past, ate lunch without my stomach nodding over memories. Normal things. That's when it hit me. I wasn't holding myself together anymore. I was just together. For years after the coma, I'd lived with a low-level tension I didn't fully recognize. A readiness. Like at any moment, the life I rebuilt could be questioned, challenged, pulled back into the gravity of what I used to be. Seeing her that last time had snapped that thread. She knew I was alive. She knew I wasn't coming back, and now she knew why. That knowledge closed the loop. I stopped checking the email address she'd found me through. Eventually, I deleted it. I changed nothing else. No dramatic reinvention, no final declaration. I didn't need one. Time did its work the way it always does. Slowly, unevenly, but thoroughly. I made friends who only knew me as I was now. People who didn't ask about gaps in my timeline because there were none, from their perspective. I dated, carefully, honestly. When relationships ended, they ended cleanly, with conversations instead of disappearances. I learned to say hard things before they became cruel ones. Every once in a while, something would remind me of the old life. A hospital siren. A couple arguing quietly in public. Someone mentioning a coma in a news story. But the memories didn't drag me under anymore. They floated by, acknowledged, then gone. I understood something essential over those years, something I wish I'd known earlier. Betrayal isn't always loud. It doesn't always involve another person, or raised voices, or obvious cruelty. Sometimes betrayal is simply a decision made while someone else can't speak. A choice to prioritize comfort over loyalty, momentum over responsibility. My wife didn't cheat on me. She didn't scream that she was leaving. She didn't throw our history back in my face. She just continued. She built a life that required my absence and treated my survival like an inconvenience to be managed. And here's the part that took me the longest to accept. She didn't do it because she was evil. She did it because it was easier than sitting with uncertainty. That doesn't make it forgivable, but it makes it understandable. And understanding is what finally freed me. Years after everything, I ran into someone who knew her. Not well, just tangentially. They mentioned her name casually, like it might mean something to me. I felt nothing. They said she was successful, respected, still carried herself like someone who had it all figured out. Then they added, almost as an afterthought, but she's always seemed haunted by something. I nodded politely and changed the subject, because that haunting wasn't my responsibility anymore. I don't know if she ever forgave herself. I don't know if she tells people the full story or a version that makes it easier to sleep at night. I don't wonder whether she thinks about me when things get quiet. Those questions belong to a life I no longer inhabit. What I do know is this. I survived something that should have ended me. Twice. Once physically, once emotionally. The first time, doctors did the work. The second time, I did. I didn't win by confronting her. I didn't win by proving anything. I didn't win by being remembered. I won by refusing to return to a place where my existence was conditional. Some people call that running away. I call it choosing myself. So if there's one thing I've learned, one thing I wish I could say to anyone who feels like they've been quietly erased while still breathing, it's this. Sometimes the deepest betrayal isn't infidelity. It's abandonment disguised as moving on. And sometimes the strongest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so complete, so grounded, and so far removed from the person who erased you, that your absence becomes the only answer they ever get.